A racist manager fires a black man for no reason. Later, the black man gets his revenge the next time he sees his old manager. John Harris stood on the construction site, surveying the activity around him. The Atlanta heat was beating down, but he barely noticed. The site was a well-oiled machine, thanks to John's leadership. He felt a sense of pride watching his team work together, each person knowing their role, each task fitting into the bigger picture. "John!" a voice called out. He turned to see David Thompson approaching, a grin on his face. David was his site supervisor and a friend. They'd worked together for years. "What's up?" John asked, wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Just checking in," David said. He glanced up at a group of workers adjusting a beam. "You've got the guys moving like clockwork today. Everything's on track." John nodded. "That's how we do it. Safety first, then speed. No shortcuts," David chuckled. "You always say that. It's why this site runs smoother than any other I've been on." He paused, then asked, "You hear anything about the new regional manager, Kyle Evans?" John shrugged. "Not much. Just that he's coming in tomorrow for a meeting. We'll find out soon enough what he's about." David's expression turned serious. "I heard he's got a reputation. Likes to come in, shake things up. Might be tough to deal with." John looked out over the site, considering David's words. "We've handled tough bosses before. As long as we do our jobs right, there's nothing to worry about." David nodded, but his face still showed concern. "Yeah, you're right. Just don't like the idea of someone coming in here and messing with what we've built." "We'll cross that bridge when we get to it," John said. "Right now, we've got a deadline to meet." Later, as John was reviewing blueprints near his truck, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and saw his wife's name. Stepping away from the noise, he answered. "Hey, Denise." "Hi, John. Just wanted to see how your day's going. It's hot out there. Don't forget to drink water." John smiled. "I'm fine. Just another day. How's Mikey?" "He's good. He's drawing pictures again, asking when you'll be home. I'll be back for dinner. Might be a little late, but I'll be there. These deadlines, you know. Just don't push yourself too hard. We need you too." "I know. I'll see you tonight. Love you." "Love you too." John hung up, a sense of calm settling over him. His family was his anchor, the reason he worked so hard. Every day was about building something better, not just for the city, but for them. As the afternoon wore on, John gathered his crew for a quick meeting. The crew nodded, their respect for John evident in their eyes. He never raised his voice or spoke down to them. To him, they were more than workers. They were a team, almost like family. "All right, let's wrap things up," John continued. "David, make sure the tools are locked up and the equipment is secured. I'll handle the paperwork." David gave a thumbs up. "You got it, boss." John headed towards his office trailer, the sun casting long shadows over the site. Just as he sat down at his desk, there was a knock on the trailer door. David stepped in, looking thoughtful. "Don't forget about the meeting tomorrow," he reminded John. "Kyle Evans is supposed to be there. I've got a feeling it's going to be interesting." John leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, I'm curious to see what he's like. We'll handle it, though." "We always do." David grinned. "That's why you're the boss. Always keeping your cool." John smiled. "Just doing my job, David. See you tomorrow." David left, and John turned back to his paperwork. He had no way of knowing how much his world would change after that meeting with Kyle Evans. But for now, he was focused, content, ready to face whatever came his way. The conference room was filled with the usual morning chatter. John sat at the long table, flipping through his notes for the upcoming presentation. Around him, the department heads and project managers were discussing deadlines, budgets, and safety protocols. It was a routine meeting, one John had attended countless times before, but today was different. Today, they were meeting Kyle Evans, the new regional manager. David Thompson sat next to John, tapping a pen on the table. "You ready for this?" he asked quietly. John nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's just see what he's about." The door opened, and the room fell silent. Kyle Evans walked in, followed by a couple of executives. He was tall, with graying hair slicked back, wearing a sharp suit that contrasted with the casual attire of the construction managers. His expression was serious, almost severe, as he surveyed the room. "Good morning, everyone," Kyle said, his voice deep and authoritative. He didn't smile. Instead, his eyes scanned each face as if he were sizing them up. "I'm Kyle Evans, your new regional manager. I've been brought in to ensure this region meets its targets and operates at peak efficiency." The executive sat at the far end of the table, nodding in agreement. John studied Kyle, noting his firm stance and no-nonsense tone. There was an air of control about him, a sense that he expected his orders to be followed without question. Kyle glanced at the agenda laid out on the table before him. "I've reviewed the reports," he said, looking up. "I see there's room for improvement. I'll be implementing some changes to streamline our operations." John exchanged a quick look with David. Changes. That word could mean anything, and not necessarily something good. Kyle's gaze landed on John. "You're John Harris, right? Project manager for the West Midtown development?" John nodded. "That's right. We're currently on schedule to complete Phase 2 by the end of the month." Kyle nodded curtly. "I've heard you're one of the top managers here, but I've also heard you like to do things your way. I'll be watching your projects closely. Efficiency is key, and I don't tolerate waste." John kept his expression neutral. "I believe in getting the job done right, sir. Safety and quality are my priorities. If that takes a little extra time, I think it's worth it." Kyle's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm not interested in excuses. Deadlines matter, and so do costs. We'll discuss this further when I visit your site." The tension in the room was palpable. John could feel his colleague's eyes on him, waiting to see how he'd respond. He nodded calmly. "Understood, Mr. Evans. We'll be ready for your visit." Kyle moved on, discussing other projects and issuing directives. The meeting lasted over an hour, with Kyle questioning each manager in turn, dissecting their reports, and pointing out inefficiencies. By the end, it was clear that Kyle was not here to make friends. He was here to make changes, whether people liked it or not. As the meeting wrapped up, John gathered his papers, feeling a mixture of irritation and caution. He dealt with difficult bosses before, but something about Kyle's approach didn't sit right. There was a sharpness to his tone, a subtle undermining of trust. John knew he had to stay focused and not let it get to him. David caught up with John as they left the conference room. "What do you think?" David asked. John shrugged. "He's tough, no doubt about that. But we can handle it. We just keep doing our job like always." David frowned. "Yeah, but did you catch how he was looking at you? Like he's already got you marked. And this talk about efficiency, he's not thinking about safety or quality. He's just looking at the bottom line." "I notice," John said. "We'll have to show him that safety and quality don't have to come at the expense of efficiency. It's a balance." David sighed. "I just don't want to see you getting caught in the middle of this, John. You've worked too hard to let someone like him mess things up." John put a hand on David's shoulder. "We'll be fine. Let's just get back to the site and focus on the work. We'll deal with Kyle Evans when the time comes." The drive back to the construction site was quiet. John stared out the window, thinking about the meeting. He knew his team respected him, knew he could rely on them to do their jobs well. But now there was an extra layer of pressure, an invisible weight that came with Kyle's scrutiny. When they arrived at the site, John called his team together for a quick briefing. He kept his tone even, not wanting to show any sign of the unease he felt. "Listen up, everyone. We've got a visit from the new regional manager, Kyle Evans, in the next few days. He's looking at how we can improve efficiency, so let's make sure everything's in top shape." One of the workers, Jake, spoke up. "I heard about him. Is it true he's a hard ass?" John didn't answer directly. "He's got high standards, and so do we. Let's just focus on our work and show him what we can do. If we keep up the good work, we won't have anything to worry about." The team nodded, and John could see the trust they had in him. It was up to him to guide them through this. As the crew went back to work, John glanced at David, who gave him a reassuring nod. Back in his office trailer, John sat down at his desk, pulling up the plans for the week. He had to be ready, not just for the work, but for whatever Kyle Evans might throw their way. He'd built his career on honesty, hard work, and respect, and he wasn't about to let anyone take that away from him. For now, John focused on what he could control. He picked up his phone and started making calls, checking on deliveries, confirming schedules, and lining up everything for the week ahead. No matter what changes Kyle Evans had in mind, John was determined to prove that his way of doing things was not only effective, but the best way to get the job done right. The morning sun was already high, casting long shadows over the construction site as John Harris walked from one end to the other, clipboard in hand. The sounds of hammers, drills, and shouting filled the air, blending into a familiar symphony. He was in his element, checking the progress of the beams going up and ensuring everything was aligned with the blueprints. "John," a voice called out. John turned to see David jogging toward him, helmet askew. He could tell from the look on David's face that something was off. "What's going on?" John asked, sensing the tension. David stopped, catching his breath. "Kyle's here. He just showed up. No warning. He's down by the storage containers, talking to some of the guys." John nodded. "All right, let's go see what he wants." As they approached, John could see Kyle Evans standing near a group of workers. Kyle had his arms crossed, his expression stern. A couple of workers were unloading steel pipes from a truck, struggling under the weight. Kyle's voice carried over the noise. "You call that efficient? You're wasting time. There's a better way to do this." The workers looked confused, unsure how to respond. John stepped forward. "Morning, Mr. Evans. I wasn't expecting you today. Is there something you'd like to see?" Kyle turned his gaze to John, eyes narrowing. "I was just checking how things are going. Seems like there's a lot of wasted effort here. Look at them." He pointed at the workers. "They should be using the lift, not hauling those pipes by hand. It's taking twice as long." John kept his voice calm. "We found that for smaller loads, it's quicker to do it manually, especially in this area where the lift isn't easily accessible. It keeps the flow steady and avoids downtime." Kyle's lips tightened into a thin line. "I see. Well, it seems to me like this whole operation could use a more efficient approach. I'm not here to micromanage, but I expect improvements." John nodded. "We're always looking for ways to improve, sir. I'll make sure the team is briefed on any adjustments." Kyle didn't seem satisfied but moved on, inspecting other parts of the site. He pointed out various issues from tool storage to safety protocols, criticizing everything as if the site was a mess. John followed, listening and making mental notes. David trailed behind, his jaw clenched. After about an hour, Kyle finished his inspection. He turned to John. "I'll be back next week for another check. Make sure things are running smoother. We can't afford inefficiencies." John nodded again. "Understood, Mr. Evans. We'll have everything ready." Kyle gave one last look around before walking through. As soon as he was out of earshot, David let out a low whistle. "He's something, isn't he?" John shrugged. "He's just trying to make his mark. Let's focus on what we can control." David shook his head. "It's more than that, John. He's got it out for you. I can feel it. I've seen bosses like him before. They come in, find the guy who's doing the best job, and then start tearing him down." John sighed. "I know, but we can't let it get to us. We keep doing our work. We show him that our way works. Actions speak louder than words." David frowned but didn't argue. "All right, but I've got your back. You know that, right?" John nodded. "I appreciate it, David. Now let's get back to it." The rest of the day was spent making adjustments based on Kyle's feedback. John held a meeting with his team, passing on the new protocols. Some of the crew grumbled about the extra steps and changes, but John kept the tone positive, emphasizing the importance of staying adaptable. By evening, the site was quieting down. John was in his trailer, going over the day's notes. A soft knock came at the door. Rachel Parker, the HR specialist, peeked her head in. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Sure, Rachel, what's up?" John replied, gesturing for her to come in. Rachel stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I heard about Kyle's visit today. How did it go?" John leaned back in his chair. He had a lot to say, wants things to be more efficient. "Nothing we can't handle." Rachel hesitated. "John, I've been hearing things from the other sites he's managed. Kyle has a reputation for finding scapegoats. If a project falls behind or goes over budget, he blames the managers, even if it's not their fault." John frowned. "I've heard rumors, but I wasn't sure how much to believe." "Well, I've seen some of the reports," Rachel continued. "He pushes people hard, and when things don't go perfectly, he finds someone to take the fall. Just be careful, okay? I don't want to see you caught in the crossfire." John nodded. "Thanks, Rachel. I'll keep that in mind. I've dealt with tough bosses before, but it's good to know what I'm up against." Rachel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "If you need anything or if things start getting worse, let me know. I'll do what I can to help." "Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate it," John said sincerely. Rachel left and John sat alone in the quiet of the trailer. He looked down at the plans on his desk, the lines and numbers blurring as he thought about the day. Kyle Evans was going to be a problem, that much was clear. But John knew he couldn't let that distract him. He had a job to do, a team depending on him, and a family waiting at home. He picked up his phone and called Denise. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, John, how was your day?" "Long," he said, rubbing his eyes. "We had a visit from the new regional manager. He's something else." Denise's voice softened. "Are you okay?" John smiled, feeling some of the tension ease. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just got a lot on my mind, but I'll handle it. I always do." "I know you will," Denise said. "Just remember, we're here for you, no matter what." "I know," John replied. "I'll be home soon. Save me a plate." "Always," Denise said. As John hung up, he felt a sense of calm return. No matter what challenges Kyle Evans threw his way, John knew he had the support he needed. He just had to stay focused, keep his team together, and prove that doing things the right way was the best way. For now, that was enough. John stood up, turned off the lights, and headed out of the trailer, ready to face whatever the next day would bring. John's morning started like any other. He arrived at the construction site early, the sun barely up over the horizon. The city was waking up around him, and the air was still cool and fresh. John walked the perimeter of the site, checking on equipment, greeting the early crew members, and making a mental list of tasks for the day. He was halfway through his routine when his phone buzzed. It was an email from corporate, marked urgent. John frowned and opened it. The message was brief, just a few lines, but it left him cold. Subject: meeting with Kyle Evans, 9:00 a.m. today. John sighed, feeling a knot form in his stomach. Kyle Evans hadn't been back to the site since his last surprise visit, but John knew he was still watching. He had felt it in the way other managers spoke more cautiously, the way the tone in meetings had shifted. He checked his watch. It was only 7:30 a.m. He had an hour and a half to get ready. John took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. David, he called over his shoulder, spotting his site supervisor nearby. David jogged over. What's up? Kyle just called for a meeting, 9 o'clock. No notice, just an email. Can you keep things running here? David's face darkened. What's he want now? Didn't he get enough the last time he was here? Don't know, but I'll find out, John said. He kept his voice steady, not wanting to show the unease creeping in. I'll take care of it. Just keep everyone focused. You got it, David said, patting John on the shoulder. If you need backup, I'll be there in a heartbeat. John gave him a tight smile. Appreciate it. I'll handle it. The drive to the corporate office felt longer than usual. John's mind was racing through possibilities. He had done everything by the book, tightened efficiency, and even implemented some of Kyle's suggestions. No matter how unnecessary they seemed, still there was a nagging feeling in his gut that today wasn't going to go well. He arrived at the sleek office building and headed up to the top floor, where Kyle's office was located. The receptionist gave him a brief nod, and John took a seat in the waiting area. He checked his watch. 5 minutes to 9. He didn't have to wait long. Mr. Harris, the receptionist called. Mr. Evans will see you now. John stood up, straightened his shirt, and walked into Kyle's office. The room was immaculate, with a large desk and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. Kyle was sitting behind his desk, flipping through a folder. He didn't look up as John entered. Morning, Mr. Evans, John said, keeping his tone professional. Kyle finally looked up, his face unreadable. Sit down, John. He gestured to the chair in front of his desk. John sat, the knot in his stomach tightening. Kyle closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. I'll get straight to the point. I've been reviewing your performance reports and your site inspections, and frankly, I'm not impressed. John blinked, caught off guard. Not impressed? Sir, we've met every deadline. The site is running efficiently, and we've had 0 safety incidents since the project started. What more are you looking for? Kyle's expression hardened. What I'm looking for is a manager who doesn't question my methods. Someone who can take direction and implement changes without pushback. You've been here a long time, John, and maybe you've gotten too comfortable. Maybe you think your way is the only way. John felt a flare of anger, but kept his voice even. With all due respect, Mr. Evans, my way has worked. My team is productive, efficient, and safe. I've made the changes you requested, but I can't compromise on safety or quality. That's non-negotiable. Kyle's eyes narrowed. That's exactly the problem. You're not in a position to decide what's negotiable. I am, and I need someone who can align with the company's goals. John felt his chest tighten. Are you saying I haven't been aligning with company goals? Kyle leaned forward. I'm saying that I need someone I can trust to follow my lead without question. And right now, I don't think that's you. The room was silent for a moment. John's mind raced. He had never once failed to meet a deadline or go over budget. His team was one of the best. This didn't make sense. Kyle opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the desk. Effective immediately. You're being relieved of your duties. You'll receive your severance package in accordance with company policy. John stared at the envelope. His name was neatly typed on the front. You're firing me? He asked, barely keeping his voice steady. Kyle's expression didn't change. I prefer to call it a restructuring. We need to ensure that all our managers are on the same page. John felt a mix of disbelief and anger rising. This isn't about restructuring. This is personal. You've been looking for a reason to get rid of me since you got here. Kyle shrugged. Call it what you want. My decision is final. Security will escort you out. You have until the end of the day to collect your things from the site. John stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. You're making a mistake. This is going to hurt the project, and you know it. Kyle stood as well, his face a mask of indifference. We'll manage. Good luck, John. John walked out of the office, his mind numb. He barely registered the receptionist as she called for security. 2 guards appeared, one on either side of him, and escorted him to the elevator. As the doors closed, John felt a wave of frustration and helplessness wash over him. He had given everything to this job, to his team, and in a few minutes, it was all taken away without a reason he could understand. Back at the construction site, John's truck was parked where he had left it. David spotted him as he walked over and hurried to meet him. "What happened?" David asked. Seeing the look on John's face, John shook his head. "He fired me, said it was a restructuring, but it's just an excuse." David's eyes widened. "Fired? You? That doesn't make any sense. What are you going to do?" John took a deep breath. "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to let this take me down. I'll figure something out." He headed to his trailer to pack up his things. The site felt different now, less like the place he had poured his heart into and more like a stranger. Workers glanced his way, their faces showing a mix of confusion and sympathy. John kept his head up, moving with purpose, even though inside he felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. David followed him into the trailer. "John, if you need anything, I'm here. We all are. The guys respect you. They know how hard you've worked." John nodded, shoving his personal items into a box. "I appreciate that, David. I really do. Just keep the site running smoothly, okay? Make sure everyone stays safe." David clenched his fists. "This isn't right, John. You've done nothing but good for this company. For this site, there's got to be something we can do." John stopped packing and looked at David. "I'll be all right. I just need some time to figure things out. You keep doing your bow, and I'll do mine." David nodded reluctantly. "All right, but don't hesitate to call me. Anytime." John managed a small smile. "I won't. Thanks, David." As John walked out of the trailer, his box of belongings under one arm, he felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't done yet. John left the construction site, his mind already turning over the possibilities. He had been knocked down, but he would find a way to get back up. He had no other choice. For his family, for himself, he had to. John sat at his kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The morning light streamed through the window, but he barely noticed. His mind was miles away, still replaying yesterday's events. The shock of being fired hadn't worn off. He felt it every time he looked around and realized he wasn't heading to the construction site. Instead of the usual sound of trucks and machinery, the house was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Denise, John's wife, came into the kitchen, her face lined with worry. She had been up late with him last night, listening as he explained everything that had happened, her support unwavering. Now she stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Have you eaten anything?" Denise asked gently. John shook his head. "Not hungry," he mumbled. Denise pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. "You can't keep doing this, John. You need to eat. You need to stay strong. For us. For Mikey." John looked up, meeting her eyes. There was concern there, but also strength. He knew she was right. He had to keep going. He couldn't afford to let this defeat him. "I know," he said quietly. I don't even know where to start." Denise reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "We'll figure it out together. You've always found a way, John. This is no different. You've got the experience, the skills. Someone will see that." John sighed, squeezing her hand. "Kyle made sure I wouldn't get any references from the company. It's going to be tough to find something without that backing me up." Denise's grip tightened. "You built that site from the ground up. Anyone who knows your work will vouch for you. And even if it takes time, we'll manage. We've always managed." John nodded, taking a sip of his cold coffee. Her words gave him some comfort, but he still felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down. He stood up, pushing his chair back. "I should start looking," he said. "The longer I wait, the harder it'll be." Denise smiled up at him. "That's the John I know. Let me make you some breakfast first, okay? You'll think clearer on a full stomach." He gave a small nod. "Okay, thanks, Denise." After breakfast, John sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, and began searching for jobs. He sent out emails, updated his resume, and made calls to old contacts. Each call was the same: expressions of sympathy, promises to keep an ear out, but nothing concrete. Hours passed, and his frustration grew with each rejection, each polite dismissal. By late afternoon, John was exhausted. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. It felt like he was hitting a wall at every turn. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. He glanced at the screen. It was David. "Hey, John," David said when he answered. "How are you holding up?" John sighed. "I've been better. Spent most of the day looking for work, but it's not looking good. I didn't realize how hard it would be to get a foot in the door without a reference from the company." "Yeah, I figured that might be a problem," David said. "But listen, I've been talking to some of the guys. Everyone's pissed about what happened. You've got a lot of support. We're all here for you. I appreciate that, David. Really, I do, John said, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt all day. David hesitated for a moment. Look, I don't know if it's any help, but I heard Summit Builders is looking for project managers. They're one of the biggest competitors in the area. Might be worth a shot. Summit Builders, John repeated, considering it. He had heard of them. They had a good reputation, solid projects, and fair management. Do you have any contacts over there? I can ask around, David said. See if I can find someone who can put in a good word. It's a long shot, but it's something. It's more than I've got right now, John said. Thanks, David. I owe you one. Just doing what I can, David replied. Hang in there, John. Something will come through. After hanging up, John felt a flicker of hope. Summit Builders could be a chance to start over, away from Kyle's influence. He quickly drafted an email attaching his resume and sent it to the general inquiries address at Summit Builders, mentioning his experience and willingness to discuss any opportunities. Days passed, each one feeling longer than the last. John fell into a routine. Mornings spent job hunting, afternoons helping around the house or taking Mikey to the park. He tried to stay busy, to keep his mind from dwelling on his dismissal, but it was always there, a shadow he couldn't shake. Then one morning, John's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. His heart skipped a beat as he answered. Hello, this is John Harris. Hi, Mr. Harris. This is Greg Wallace from Summit Builders. I got your email and wanted to see if you were available for an interview. We're looking to fill a project manager position, and your experience caught my eye. John sat up straight, trying to keep his voice steady. Yes, absolutely. I'm available. When would be a good time? How about tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock? Greg suggested. Our office is downtown. I'll send you the address. Perfect, John said. I'll be there, thank you. After hanging up, John felt a wave of relief. It wasn't a job yet, but it was a step forward. He found Denise in the living room folding laundry. I've got an interview, he said, unable to hide his excitement. Denise turned, her face lighting up. John, that's great. Where? Summit Builders, tomorrow morning. Denise wrapped her arms around him. I knew you'd find something. I knew it. John hugged her back, feeling lighter than he had in days. It's just an interview, but it's a start. I just need to get my foot in the door. The next morning, John stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. He hadn't worn a suit in a while, and it felt strange. He took a deep breath, looking at his reflection. You can do this, he told himself. Just be honest. Be yourself. He arrived at Summit Builders' office a little early, taking a moment to steady his nerves before walking in. The receptionist greeted him with a smile and directed him to a conference room where Greg Wallace was waiting. Greg stood as John entered, extending a hand. He was in his mid-40s with a warm smile and a firm handshake. John Harris, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for having me, John replied, taking a seat. The interview went well. Greg asked about John's experience, his approach to project management, and how he handled challenges on the site. John spoke confidently, drawing on his years of experience in the projects he had managed. He emphasized his commitment to safety and quality, traits he had always prioritized. Greg nodded, listening intently. You've got an impressive track record, John. It's clear you know what you're doing. Can you tell me why you left your previous company? John hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. There was a change in management. The new regional manager and I had different approaches. I was let go as part of a restructuring. Greg studied John for a moment, then nodded. I've heard of those situations. It's unfortunate, but it happens. From what you've told me, it sounds like you'd be a good fit here. We value safety and quality as much as efficiency. John felt a surge of hope. That's good to hear. I believe in doing things the right way, not cutting corners. Greg smiled. That's exactly what we're looking for. I'll need to check your references and run through the final approval process. But if everything checks out, I'd like to offer you the position. John's heart skipped a beat. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate the opportunity. They shook hands, and John left the office feeling lighter than he had in weeks. He called Denise on the way home, sharing the good news. It's not official yet, he said, but it looks promising. I'm so proud of you, John, Denise said. You never gave up. This is just the beginning. As John drove home, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he was moving forward. He had found a new path, and he was ready to take it, one step at a time. John walked into Summit Builders' main office, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. It had been a week since his interview with Greg Wallace, and today was his first day as a project manager for one of the biggest construction companies in Atlanta. As he stepped into the building, the cool air and sleek design were a stark contrast to the rough edges of the construction sites he was used to. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild his career on his own terms. Greg greeted him in the lobby with a firm handshake and a friendly smile. "Welcome aboard, John. We're glad to have you." "Thanks, Greg," John replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm looking forward to getting started." "Let's get you settled in," Greg said, leading him down a hallway lined with framed photographs of past projects. "We've got a lot to cover, but I think you'll find your feet quickly. We're putting you in charge of the Riverside development. It's one of our biggest projects this year." John nodded, recognizing the name. The Riverside development was a high-profile project, a series of luxury condos and retail spaces along the riverfront. It was a complex build, but John was more than ready for the challenge. They reached a glass-walled conference room where several team members were waiting. Greg introduced John to the team. "This is John Harris, our new project manager. John, this is Tina, our lead architect, and Jason, our site supervisor." Tina, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a firm handshake, smiled. "Nice to meet you, John. I've heard good things about you." "Thanks, Tina. Looking forward to working with you," John said, shaking her hand. Jason, a tall man with a no-nonsense demeanor, gave John a nod. "Welcome aboard. We've got a lot to do, but I'm sure you'll fit right in." Greg gestured for everyone to sit. "Let's go over the project plan. John, we're counting on you to bring this one in on time and under budget. We've had some delays with permits, but everything's cleared now. You'll need to get the crew up to speed and make sure we hit the ground running." John listened carefully as Tina and Jason outlined the current status of the project. He asked questions, taking notes, absorbing as much information as he could. The team had already made good progress, but there were still plenty of challenges ahead: tight deadlines, complex engineering work, and the ever-present need to maintain safety on site. After the meeting, Greg showed John to his office. It was small but functional, with a desk, a computer, and a window that overlooked the city. John set his briefcase down and looked around, feeling a sense of purpose settle in. Greg leaned against the doorframe. "How are you feeling?" John smiled. "Good. There's a lot to take in, but I'm ready. This project is big, but I've handled big projects before." Greg nodded. "I know you have. That's why you're here. Just keep doing what you've always done. Lead by example, stay on top of the details, and don't be afraid to speak up if something doesn't look right." "Will do," John said. "Thanks for the opportunity, Greg. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Greg replied. "If you need anything, my door's always open. Now, why don't you head over to the Riverside site? Jason's already there. He'll give you the tour." John grabbed his hard hat and left the office, feeling more confident with each step. The Riverside site was a short drive away, located on a stretch of prime real estate along the river. As he pulled up, John was impressed by the scale of the operation. Cranes towered overhead, and workers moved efficiently around the partially constructed buildings. It was a hive of activity, organized and focused. Jason spotted John and walked over. "Welcome to Riverside," he said, gesturing to the site around them. "We've got a lot going on. Let me show you around." They spent the next hour touring the site. Jason explained the layout, pointing out key areas and ongoing tasks. John listened intently, asking questions about the schedule, the materials, and the crew. He noted the progress already made, the strong foundations and the careful planning. As they walked, John noticed a group of workers unloading steel beams. They seemed to be struggling with the weight, moving slowly and carefully. John stopped, watching them for a moment. "Is there a reason we're not using the crane for that?" John asked, turning to Jason. Jason shrugged. "The crane's tied up with another load. We're trying to keep things moving." John frowned. "It's taking too long this way. We should adjust the schedule so the crane can handle the heavier loads. It'll save time and reduce the risk of injury." Jason looked at John, considering his suggestion. "You're right. I'll make the change." They continued the tour, and John made mental notes of other areas for improvement. By the time they finished, John felt more at ease. The site was well managed, and Jason seemed competent and open to feedback. This was a team he could work with, a project he could see through to completion. Back in the temporary office on site, John sat down with Jason and the foreman to discuss the changes he wanted to implement. He kept his tone respectful, emphasizing the need for efficiency and safety. The foreman nodded, taking notes and agreeing to relay the information to the rest of the crew. John spent the rest of the day meeting with different teams, getting to know the workers, and familiarizing himself with the site's logistics. He was struck by how receptive everyone was, how open they were to his ideas. It was a stark contrast to the tension he had felt under Kyle's scrutiny. As the day came to an end, John found himself standing at the edge of the site, looking out over the river. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the water. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of satisfaction. It had been a good first day. There was a lot of work to do, but he was ready for it. For the first time in weeks, John felt like he was where he belonged. He pulled out his phone and called Denise. She answered on the first ring. "Hey, how did it go?" John smiled, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "It went well, better than I expected. The team's solid, the project's moving forward, and I think I can make a real difference here." "I knew you would," Denise said. "I'm so proud of you, John. I never doubted for a second that you'd land on your feet." "Thanks, Denise. I couldn't have done it without you. I'll be home soon, okay?" "Okay. We'll be waiting." John hung up, slipping his phone back into his pocket. He turned to head back to his car, feeling lighter, more hopeful than he had in a long time. As he drove home, the city lights flickering on around him, John thought about the future. This new beginning felt right, like a second chance to build something meaningful. He was ready to face whatever came next, confident in his skills and his ability to lead. Whatever challenges lay ahead, John knew he could handle them. This was just the start of something bigger, and he was ready to make the most of it. John's routine at Summit Builders quickly fell into place. Each morning he arrived early at the Riverside site, greeted by the sound of machinery and the hum of activity. John thrived in the controlled chaos, overseeing the flow of materials, coordinating with subcontractors, and ensuring every task aligned with the project schedule. The Riverside development was ambitious, but John's team was skilled and determined. Within weeks, John made several changes to streamline operations. He reorganized the site's layout, creating more efficient pathways for equipment and workers. He implemented a new safety protocol that reduced incidents and downtime. The results were immediate. Productivity increased, and the atmosphere among the crew improved. Workers respected John's hands-on approach and his willingness to listen to their concerns. One morning, John stood near the scaffolding, discussing the day's plans with Jason, the site supervisor. They were interrupted by Greg Wallace, who had come by for a surprise visit. Greg's arrival was a welcome sight. He often visited sites to check in and offer support. "John, Jason," Greg greeted them with a smile. "How's everything going?" "Morning, Greg," John said, shaking his hand. "Things are moving smoothly. We're ahead of schedule for the condo units. Jason's team is doing a great job." Jason nodded. "We've made some adjustments to the workflow, and it's paying off. John's changes have really streamlined things." Greg looked pleased. "That's what I like to hear. I've been getting good reports from the upper management about how things are running here. Keep it up, both of you." John felt a sense of pride. It was good to know his efforts were being recognized. "Thanks, Greg. We're all working hard to make this project a success." Greg nodded, looking thoughtful. "Actually, John, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. Do you have a few minutes?" "Of course," John replied, curious. He followed Greg to a quieter area of the site, away from the noise. Greg turned to John, his expression serious but friendly. "John, you've done outstanding work here. Your leadership and ability to optimize the project have not gone unnoticed. Summit Builders has a few other major projects in the pipeline, and we're looking for someone to oversee them as a senior project manager." John blinked, taken aback. "Senior project manager?" Greg nodded. "We think you'd be a perfect fit. You've proven you can handle large-scale projects, manage teams effectively, and meet tight deadlines. It would mean more responsibility, a bigger team, and of course, a substantial pay increase. But I'm confident you're ready for it." John felt a surge of emotion, pride, excitement, and a bit of relief. It had been a challenging few months since losing his job, but this opportunity felt like validation of his skills and resilience. "I'd be honored, Greg. Thank you. I'm ready for the challenge." Greg smiled. "I knew you would be. We'll start the transition process soon. I want you to finish up at Riverside and then move on to the new projects. There's a big one coming up, a mixed-use development on the east side of the city. It's going to be our flagship project for the next 2 years." John's mind raced with possibilities. "I'll do everything I can to make it a success." "I know you will," Greg said. "That's why I'm putting my trust in you." "Congratulations, John." They shook hands, and John felt a wave of satisfaction. This promotion wasn't just a step up the career ladder. It was a chance to prove that his way of managing, with respect, efficiency, and a focus on quality, was the right way. He had found a company that valued those principles, and he was determined to make the most of this opportunity. As Greg left the site, John stood for a moment, taking it all in. The Riverside project was thriving, and now he had the chance to take on even more. He felt a renewed sense of purpose. His journey from losing his job to this moment had been tough, but it had strengthened him, made him more determined to succeed. He walked back to the center of the site where workers were setting up for the next phase of construction. John called Jason over and shared the news about his promotion. Jason grinned. "That's great, John. You deserve it. But I have to say, we're going to miss having you here every day." "I'm not going anywhere just yet," John said with a smile. "We've still got work to do. And even when I move on, I'll make sure we've got the right people in place to keep things running smoothly." Jason nodded. "You can count on us. We'll make sure Riverside is a success all the way to the end." The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. John felt a renewed energy as he moved through the site, checking on the progress, talking with the crew, and planning the next steps. He stayed late into the evening, going over plans in the on-site office, making notes for the coming weeks. As the sky darkened, John finally called it a day. He packed up his things and headed to his car. On the drive home, he thought about everything that had happened. The job at Summit Builders had been more than just a new beginning. It had given him a chance to prove his worth, to show that he could lead and succeed even after a setback. And now, with this promotion, he was taking another step forward. When he arrived home, Denise was waiting for him in the kitchen, dinner ready on the table. John kissed her on the cheek, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I have some good news," he said, sitting down. Denise looked at him, curious. "What is it?" "I got promoted," John said, unable to keep the smile off his face. "Senior project manager. I'll be overseeing some of Summit Builders' biggest projects." Denise's eyes widened with joy. "John, that's amazing. I knew you could do it. You've worked so hard." John took her hand, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Denise. You've been my rock through all of this. Thank you for believing in me." Denise squeezed his hand. "Always. I have seen how strong you are, how dedicated. This is just the beginning. I know there's so much more ahead for you." They sat together talking about the future, about the opportunities that lay ahead. John felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had faced uncertainty, doubt, and fear, but he had come out stronger. He was climbing the ladder, not just in his career, but in life, proving that setbacks didn't define him. How he responded to them did. As the evening wore on, John looked out the window, seeing the city lights twinkling in the distance. The road ahead was clear now, filled with promise and potential. He was ready for whatever came next, confident in his abilities and the support of his family. John knew there would still be challenges, but he was prepared to face them head on. With each new project, each new step, he was building something lasting, not just for his career, but for his life. And that was a foundation he could stand on, no matter what the future held. A few months had passed since John's promotion to senior project manager at Summit Builders. His days were filled with back-to-back meetings, site visits, and coordination with various teams. He thrived on the challenge, feeling more in control and respected than he had ever felt at his previous job. Every project he touched seemed to flourish, and his reputation within Summit Builders grew. He enjoyed being at the center of high-profile developments and having a say in the company's strategic direction. One morning, as John was preparing for a meeting, his phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Greg Wallace, the director of operations. The subject line read, "Urgent merger announcement meeting, today at 10 a.m. John's eyebrows rose. He hadn't heard anything about a merger. His curiosity piqued. He grabbed his laptop and headed to the conference room. By the time he arrived, the room was filled with other senior managers and executives, all of them looking as surprised as he felt. Greg stood at the front, beside a projector screen, displaying Summit Builders' logo alongside another familiar logo, one that John hadn't expected to see again. It was the logo of his former employer, the construction company, where he had spent years before Kyle Evans had unceremoniously fired him. "Good morning, everyone," Greg began, looking around the room. "I'm sure you've all seen the rumors, and I'm here to confirm them. Summit Builders is finalizing a merger with Titan Construction." A murmur rippled through the room. John felt his stomach tighten. Titan Construction. It was like hearing a ghost name whispered in the dark. Greg continued, outlining the strategic benefits of the merger: increased market share, access to Titan's extensive client base, and the combined expertise that would position the merged company as a leader in the industry. "Now, I know mergers come with uncertainty," Greg said, addressing the room's tension, "but I want to assure you that we're approaching this transition carefully. Our goal is to integrate the teams and processes in a way that maintains our high standards. To do that, we'll need strong leadership." Greg's eyes scanned the room and landed on John. "John, I'd like you to oversee the integration of Titan's project management teams with ours. Your experience and track record make you the ideal person to ensure a smooth transition." John felt a mix of pride and unease. Overseeing the merger was a huge responsibility, a clear sign of the trust Greg had in him. But it also meant confronting the remnants of his past at Titan Construction, including the specter of Kyle Evans. "Of course, Greg," John said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm ready to help in any way I can." "Excellent," Greg said. "You'll start by meeting with Titan's management team tomorrow. I want you to get a feel for their operations, identify areas for synergy, and report back on any potential challenges." After the meeting, John returned to his office, his mind racing. He tried to focus on the task at hand, reviewing Titan's projects, studying their team structures, and preparing a plan for the merger. But his thoughts kept drifting back to Kyle Evans. Would Kyle still be there? Would they cross paths again? John felt a familiar tightness in his chest but pushed it down. He was no longer the man scrambling for a bomb after being fired without cause. He was a senior project manager at one of the top firms in the city. He had earned his place, and he wasn't going to let anyone undermine him. The next day, John drove to Titan Construction's headquarters. As he parked his car, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. The building looked the same, modern, with glass and steel reflecting the morning sun. He walked through the lobby, past the front desk, and into the conference room where the meeting was scheduled. Inside, several Titan managers were already seated, exchanging quiet conversations. John recognized some familiar faces, but others were new. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on the last person he wanted to see, Kyle Evans. Kyle was standing near the window, talking to another executive. His back was turned, but John would recognize that posture anywhere. A chill ran down John's spine. He took a steadying breath and walked in. "Good morning, everyone," John said, projecting confidence. "I'm John Harris from Summit Builders. I'll be overseeing the integration process as we move forward with the merger." Kyle turned at the sound of John's voice, his expression shifting from surprise to something unreadable. For a moment, neither man spoke. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then Kyle's lips curled into a thin smile. "John, didn't expect to see you here." "Likewise," John said evenly, maintaining eye contact. "It's been a while." Kyle shrugged, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Yes, it has. I see you've landed on your feet. Senior project manager at Summit, huh? Not bad." John nodded. "Not bad at all. Let's get started, shall we?" The meeting was tense but professional. John led the discussion, focusing on the logistics of integrating the teams and aligning project management practices. He kept his tone neutral, asking questions and taking notes. Kyle offered occasional input, but his remarks were guarded. As the meeting progressed, John noticed that Kyle seemed less confident, as if the power dynamics had shifted since their last encounter. After the meeting, John stayed behind to speak with a few of the Titan managers, gathering more information about their current projects. He was about to leave when Kyle approached him. "John," Kyle said quietly, "can we talk?" John turned to face him, keeping his expression neutral. "What about?" Kyle glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. "I know things didn't end well between us, but that's in the past. This merger is a chance for a fresh start. We could put the past behind us, work together to make this transition successful." John studied Kyle's face, searching for sincerity but finding only calculation. "A fresh start," John repeated. "You mean like the one you gave me when you fired me without cause? Or is this more about covering your own back now that you're facing a merger?" Kyle's eyes narrowed. "You think you're in control now, is that it? Because you have a fancy title in Greg Wallace's ear? I know how this game works, John. Alliances shift. Today's ally could be tomorrow's competitor." John kept his voice steady. "This isn't about games, Kyle. This is about doing what's best for the company and the people who work here. I'm not interested in personal vendettas. But make no mistake, I won't let anyone undermine the work we're doing at Summit. Not even you." Kyle's expression hardened. "We'll see about that." John turned away, ending the conversation. He felt a sense of resolve, a determination to rise above the petty power plays. He had worked too hard to let someone like Kyle drag him down. As he walked out of the building, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. The merger was a challenge, but it was also an opportunity to show that leadership wasn't about titles or control. It was about integrity, fairness, and the willingness to stand up for what was right. Back at Summit Builders, John met with Greg to go over his findings. He outlined the strengths and weaknesses of Titan's operations, highlighting areas where they could improve and potential challenges. Greg listened carefully, nodding. "Good work, John. It sounds like you've got a handle on this. We'll take your recommendations into account as we move forward." "Thanks, Greg," John said. "I'll keep you updated on any developments." As John left Greg's office, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He had faced down his past, stood his ground, and was making a positive impact on the future of Summit builders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but John was ready to lead the way, confident in his ability to navigate the challenges. With each step he took, John knew he was building something stronger, not just for the company, but for himself. The merger wasn't just about business. It was about proving that resilience, hard work, and integrity were the true foundations of success. And John was determined to see it through, no matter what. The merger process between Summit Builders and Titan Construction was in full swing, with John at the forefront of the integration efforts. His days were packed with meetings, strategy sessions, and site visits, all aimed at aligning the operations of the two companies. It was a daunting task, but John was determined to ensure that the transition was smooth and efficient. John's interactions with Titan's management team became more frequent, and while most of the managers were cooperative, Kyle Evans remained a thorn in his side. Kyle's demeanor was professional on the surface, but John sensed an undercurrent of hostility. Kyle often questioned John's decisions in meetings, making passive-aggressive comments that hinted at his disdain. John chose to rise above it, focusing on his work and the goals of the merger. One afternoon, as John was reviewing some project files in his office, his phone buzzed. It was Rachel Parker, the HR specialist, who had supported him back when he worked at Titan Construction. John hadn't heard from her since the merger was announced, but he was glad to see her name on the screen. "Rachel, it's good to hear from you," John said, answering the call. "John, I'm glad I caught you," Rachel replied, her voice carrying a sense of urgency. "I've been meaning to reach out. I've been doing some digging around, and I think there's something you need to know." John's interest peaked. "What's going on?" Rachel hesitated for a moment before speaking. "It's about Kyle. There have been numerous complaints against him over the years, allegations of discrimination, unethical behavior, intimidation. I'm talking about serious stuff, John. The problem is most of these complaints were either ignored or swept under the rug." John's jaw tightened. He had suspected that Kyle's management style was harsh, but he hadn't realized the extent of it. "Why wasn't anything done about this before?" Rachel sighed. "Kyle had a lot of influence with the higher-ups at Titan. People were afraid to speak out or pursue the complaints. They were scared of losing their jobs. But with the merger, things are different now. The files and complaints are still there, buried in HR records. If we can bring them to light, it might be enough to hold Kyle accountable." John felt a surge of determination. This was an opportunity not only to protect his own team, but to stand up for those who had been wronged by Kyle's actions. "Rachel, can you get me those records? I need solid evidence if I'm going to take this to Greg and the other executives at Summit." "I've already started pulling them together," Rachel said. "It's going to take some time, but I'll get everything I can." "John, you're the only one who can do something about this. You've got the credibility and the backing of Summit. If you can expose what Kyle's done, it could finally end his reign of intimidation." "Leave it to me," John said firmly. "Keep gathering the information, and let me know if you need any help. We're going to make sure Kyle answers for his actions." Over the next few days, Rachel sent John a series of documents and emails, complaints filed by employees, internal memos, and reports that had been conveniently ignored. As John reviewed the evidence, a pattern emerged. Kyle had consistently used his position to bully and intimidate employees, particularly those who challenged his authority or questioned his decisions. There were accusations of racial discrimination, unethical treatment of subcontractors, and retaliatory behavior against those who dared to speak up. John felt a mix of anger and resolve. This wasn't just about Kyle's past treatment of him. It was about standing up for all the employees who had been silenced. John knew he had to act carefully. He needed to present the evidence in a way that would force the executives to take it seriously and ensure that justice was served. One morning, John called a meeting with Greg Wallace. He walked into Greg's office, carrying a folder filled with the documents Rachel had provided. Greg looked up from his desk, noticing the serious expression on John's face. "John, what's going on?" Greg asked. John sat down, placing the folder on Greg's desk. "Greg, I've come across some information that I think you need to see. It's about Kyle Evans." Greg's expression turned serious as he opened the folder and began to read through the documents. The room was silent as Greg flipped through the pages, his face growing more concerned with each passing minute. After a long pause, Greg looked up. "This is serious, John. Why hasn't any of this come to light before?" "Kyle had a lot of influence at Titan," John explained. "He used his position to intimidate people into staying quiet. But now that we're merging, these complaints can't be ignored. We have a responsibility to our employees to ensure a safe and fair working environment. So, Kyle's actions are a direct threat to that." Greg nodded, clearly troubled. You're right. We can't let this slide. I'll need to discuss this with the other executives in our legal team. This could have major implications for the merger. John leaned forward. Greg, I understand the complexities of the merger, but we can't let that stop us from doing the right thing. If we ignore this, we're no better than the people who covered it up before. Kyle has to be held accountable. Greg's eyes met John's, and he nodded. I agree. I'll take this to the board. In the meantime, keep this information secure. We can't let Kyle get wind of it before we're ready to act. John felt a sense of relief. This was a step in the right direction. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he had started a process that could finally bring justice. He left Greg's office, determined to see this through to the end. Later that day, as John walked the Riverside site, he couldn't help but think about the impact of his actions. Standing up to Kyle wasn't just about protecting his own career. It was about making sure no one else had to go through what he and others had experienced. He knew there would be fallout. Kyle wouldn't go down without a fight, but John was ready. He had faced challenges before, and he would face this one head on. After wrapping up his day, John called Rachel to update her. I spoke with Greg. He's taking the evidence to the board. It's going to take time, but we're making progress. That's great news, John, Rachel said, her voice filled with relief. I've been talking to some of the people who filed complaints. They're scared, but they're willing to speak up if it comes to that. You're giving them hope. We're doing this together, John said. It's not just about taking down Kyle. It's about setting a standard, showing that intimidation and discrimination won't be tolerated. Absolutely, Rachel agreed. Keep me updated, and I'll keep digging. We're going to see this through. As John hung up, he felt a sense of purpose. The merger had brought old challenges back to the surface, but it had also given him a chance to make a real difference. He was more than just a project manager. He was a leader, committed to fairness and integrity, and he would do whatever it took to protect the people who looked up to him. The battle against Kyle was just beginning, but John was prepared. With every piece of evidence, every conversation, he was building a case, not just against Kyle, but for a better, stronger company. John knew the road ahead would be tough, but he was ready to face it, confident in his purpose, in the support of those who believed in him. No matter what Kyle did, John would not back down. He had come too far to let injustice prevail, and he was determined to see that the right thing was done once and for all. The conference room was tense. John sat at one end of the long table, his hands resting on a thick file of documents. Greg Wallace was beside him, flipping through his own set of papers. Across from them sat several board members of Summit Builders, their expressions serious. The air was heavy with anticipation. It was the day of the big meeting, the one where the board would review the evidence against Kyle Evans. John had spent the last few days preparing for this moment. Every detail had been meticulously documented, every complaint carefully noted. He knew the weight of what he was about to do. Bringing these allegations to light wasn't just about Kyle. It was about setting a precedent for the company's values and integrity. It was about making sure everyone was held accountable, no matter their position. Greg cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Thank you all for coming, he began. We're here today to discuss serious allegations of misconduct against Kyle Evans, the former regional manager of Titan Construction, now part of Summit Builders following the merger. John Harris has been leading the investigation into these allegations. John, the floor is yours. John took a deep breath and stood. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each board member before he spoke. Thank you, Greg. Over the past few weeks, we've gathered substantial evidence showing a pattern of unethical behavior by Kyle Evans. This includes documented complaints of discrimination, intimidation, and retaliation against employees who raised concerns about safety and fairness. He opened the file and began to outline the findings one by one. Each document was projected onto the screen, showing the board members the written complaints, internal emails, and memos that had been hidden or ignored. John described how Kyle had targeted minority employees, made biased decisions in hiring and promotions, and created a hostile work environment through threats and intimidation. As John spoke, he saw the board members exchanging glances, their faces growing more serious with each piece of evidence. He knew the impact of his words. These weren't just isolated incidents. They formed a clear pattern of misconduct. Kyle Evans had abused his power for years, and it was time for that to end. Employees at Titan Construction felt they had no voice, John continued. Many were afraid to come forward, fearing retaliation or job loss. But now, with the merger, we have the chance to change that culture, to show our commitment to integrity and fairness. We cannot allow behavior like Kyle's to go unchecked. Greg nodded in agreement. I've reviewed the evidence with John, and it's clear that Kyle's actions are unacceptable. If we want Summit Builders to be a leader in the industry, we must hold our leaders to the highest standards. One of the board members, a woman with short gray hair, leaned forward. John, this is compelling evidence. But how do you propose we proceed? What steps should we take to address this situation? John had anticipated this question. He answered confidently, first, I recommend that we terminate Kyle Evans's employment immediately, based on the documented evidence of misconduct. Second, we need to conduct a thorough review of all complaints filed under his management to ensure that any unresolved issues are addressed. Finally, we should implement new training programs for managers and employees to prevent similar situations in the future. Another board member spoke up, nodding thoughtfully. These are serious measures, but given the gravity of the situation, I agree they're necessary. We cannot afford to have our company's reputation damaged by unethical practices. Greg looked around the table. Are there any objections to John's recommendations? The room was silent. One by one, the board members nodded their agreement. Greg turned to John. Thank you for your thorough investigation and your commitment to our company's values. We will proceed with your recommendations. Kyle Evans's employment will be terminated effective immediately, and we will launch a review of all outstanding complaints. John felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It was done. Justice was being served, not just for him, but for everyone who had been mistreated by Kyle. John knew this was a step in the right direction towards creating a workplace where everyone felt safe and respected. The meeting adjourned, and as the board members filed out, Greg stayed behind with John. He placed a hand on John's shoulder. You did the right thing, John. This took courage, and it's going to make a difference. Not just for us, but for the people who trust us to lead with integrity. John nodded. Thank you, Greg. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I couldn't let Kyle continue to get away with what he was doing. People deserve better. Greg smiled. And because of you, they'll get better. Now let's make sure we follow through. This is just the beginning. As John walked out of the conference room, he felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. He had faced his past, confronted his fears, and taken a stand. The merger had brought challenges, but it had also given him the chance to prove what kind of leader he was. He had shown that leadership was about more than just overseeing projects. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. John returned to his office, his mind already turning to the next steps. There was still work to be done to ensure a smooth transition and to rebuild trust within the company. But John felt more confident than ever. He knew that he was making a difference, not just in the projects he managed, but in the lives of the people he worked with. Later that day, John received a call from Rachel. I heard the news, she said, her voice filled with emotion. They fired Kyle. John, you did it. You stood up for all of us. John smiled. We did it, Rachel. You played a big part in this. Thank you for your support and for believing that we could make a difference. Rachel's voice was firm. I always knew you could. This is just the start, John. You're changing things for the better. After the call, John sat back in his chair, looking out the window. The city stretched out before him, a testament to the work he had done and the challenges he had overcome. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the struggles, the setbacks, and the triumphs. He knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but he was ready to face them with the same determination and integrity that had brought him this far. John had come full circle. He had started his career with a passion for building, for creating something lasting and meaningful. Now he was doing that on a deeper level, shaping not just buildings, but the culture and values of the company he was proud to be a part of. John knew that his work was far from over, but he was ready to continue building a future that was strong, just, and fair for everyone. As the sun set over the city, John felt a sense of peace. He had made a stand, made a difference, and would continue to lead with integrity. In a world where so much was uncertain, John had found his foundation, and he would build upon it, brick by brick, day by day.